Good day, I'm Vincent Saxtetter and this is the After the Age of Fire channel. This is episode 51, recorded on June 20th, 2026. The title of this episode is Technocracy and AI. This is a prepping channel meant to help you and your family line prepare for the next era in human history. We're ending an era in which from generation to generation, the human race had about twice as much of every resource as it did the previous generation. So we were doubling our consumption every 22 years. And so what I'm preparing you for is to flourish and thrive and reproduce in the new era that's coming. We're transitioning into it right now. In which we'll no longer be doubling our consumption, and we'll have a little bit less than we do today. Right now we have a total of about 60,000 calories per person per day of energy that we spend, and in the coming era it'll be closer to 30,000. Plus we'll have less of other resources as well. That 60,000 that we consume today, 41,000 is from coal, oil, and gas. Another 5,000 is from what we call the renewables. Another 15,000 is from food, fodder, and wood. The 30,000 that we'll have in the coming era will be some combination of those. If you want to see the ins and outs of the different energy sources and why it will be only 30,000, review episodes roughly 10 through 38 of this channel. We're now in the second section of this channel, which started with episode 39. So this is the 13th in the second section, and this is about how to recognize the transition as it happens and where are we in it. Has it already started? And if it has started, how far are we through it? So in the previous episodes, last 3 episodes, we talked about the possibility that we might reorganize ourselves for the new conditions that we'll be living in. The first 2 episodes were 48 and 49 were about whether we might have a kind of tightly coordinated reorganization where everybody is either cooperating or competing or fighting, small individuals, small groups, larger groups, governments in the whole world, all paying so close attention to each other that we're able to pivot rather quickly in a year or 2 perhaps in order to adjust to the new conditions. Okay, and in the previous episode 50, was about the possibility that some actors with power over the whole human race might be able to exert enough control as to reorganize the whole human race to live on 30,000 calories per person per day, and to live without the doublings. And none of those are in the cards. Neither type of reorganization. There will be a reorganization, but it won't be one that we planned ourselves, that we've worked out that we've decided ourselves. It's going to happen to us. It won't be our doing. So as I discussed that, one of the things that I was looking for to see whether a reorganization was likely to happen was whether we're accelerating towards something. And human progress, as far as I can tell, and look again at episodes 48 and 49, human progress is not accelerating. If anything, it's decelerating. We're going slower than we used to the previous centuries. And as I was talking about that, I mentioned AI and computing, and I talked about how our computing resources are no longer. I mean, we've hit the limit in terms of our ability to construct faster or more powerful computing devices. Instead, the only thing left to do is to make more of them, which of course takes energy and resources. So we've hit a limit there, and I also talked about the possibility of using electronic devices for surveillance and top-down control. But I didn't take on AI directly or thoroughly, so this episode is about AI and what it's about. So overall, my message here is that AI is just one more step, an incremental step in a program of action that we've been following for a long time already. That action was to try to organize ourselves along the lines of a technocracy. So I'll describe what a technocracy is in a minute. But overall, since this is just one more step, it's the tip of a spear. AI is the tip of a spear of a long progression of steps towards technocracy. We can already see what the effects of AI will be because they're already around us even without AI. Also, AI is limited. We are running to the limit of our computing resources. We're close to that limit, and even if we were able to continue multiplying our computing resources some more, it has some intrinsic limits. But as it is, we're very close to that computing limit. So it's not going to give us a revolution. It will just give us another step along the technocratic path. It does have vulnerabilities, and I'll discuss that toward the end, perhaps in the next episode, of what you could do to control or defeat AI. So the human race is embarked on a program of technocracy. I want to mention that this has always been attractive to the human race. In fact, going back to the first, when we first invented a written language, which was cuneiform in Babylon, the whole purpose of that language, all the million or so documents that we have, and that are now have been transported mostly to London. Those documents are devoted almost entirely to the outputs of the land of Babylon and its workers, and of what was due to different government officials. These government officials were specialists. They were specialists that took on specific roles in running the government of Babylon. So already there was a high technology. At that time it was cuneiform, but there are also other things like irrigation and so on. You had specialists. You had in a bureaucracy, and you had control and surveillance of the population, and you had a development of a bunch of best practices of ways that specialists in government should run things, but also of how individuals should do their work and live their lives. So these are some of the key elements of a technocracy. It's one where you develop specialists and they follow best practices. You're always refining and improving your best practices. You have a bureaucracy. You collect data, and you control and surveil people. So a lot of it is based on collecting data and analyzing it, extracting trends, and making decisions based on that. So your specialists are about knowing how to interpret certain data, what data to look for, what to do about it. So they have expert knowledge. They even have handbooks. And a technocracy moves steadily towards data-driven decisions. You have policies for, given this kind of data, this is what you do. The decisions that you make based on data may occur slowly or quickly. They might be what to do with a specific person as they show up at a door, at your office door, for instance. Do you turn them away immediately? Do you arrest them? Do you let them in? Or they may be bigger decisions like whether to go to war or not. There was, in the last couple centuries, there's been a renewed effort at technocracy. So I've talked about what's called best practices over and over again in this channel. best practices are all our ideas of all the things that we think we should do, and ways that we should organize our society that will ensure our continued growth. And as we speak, I've called out the fact is that those best practices can no longer ensure doublings of our consumption, but we've been very assiduous about trying to find out what are the reasons why we're doubling, and making sure that those continue and are amplified. And that has included a lot of, I had an episode where I talked about analysis, and analysis is the vision of the world and of your knowledge about the world, and of your workforce and your people into many different specialties, in an attempt to get more done and get it done better. It's also how we design our devices, and I called out some of the problems with analysis. But so we can go back to World War II, for instance. In World War II, there was a renewed interest in analyzing data, say about the German economy, to figure out how, with your bombers and your other weapons, how you could most effectively cripple it. And there were number crunchers brought in from the Ivy League universities to do that sort of work. And then the result was decisions to firebomb many German cities, for instance. But all of this took on so around then we were also introducing our first computers just at the end of World War II, and we began to use what were called mainframe computers to run our businesses, our large businesses, our universities, our governments, and so on. And that involved, of course, collecting a lot of data and massaging it and making decisions about it. But it took on a new speed. It accelerated really amazingly fast in around 1980, when personal computers started showing up on people's desks. And one of the killer apps that was the reason why people bought personal computers was because they had something on them called a spreadsheet. And I'll just explain what it is, because I think they're a little bit dated and some of you might not know what a spreadsheet is. But it's something where you can keep track of 1 million numbers on your computer, and you see them all visually. Well, you have to scroll around to see onto different sectors, or click or change from tab to tab. But the beauty of a spreadsheet is that you can, say, keep track of all the affairs of your business or your school or your family on one, at least all the numerical aspects of your affairs on your computer, and then you can analyze the effects of different things. You can change a single number and see how that changes your budget for the rest of the year. And so you can begin to make decisions about, if I change this number, or if I spend my effort on improving this aspect of my school, as opposed to spending my money on some other aspect of my school, what will the effect be? And that will assist me in making decisions about where I should spend my energy on that, my effort, or which staff I should hire or fire, or which programs I should arrange for my students. So there's a role called program management, and at least in my day, a program manager was somebody whose job was to look at that spreadsheet all the time, that software, and look at all the numbers, keep track of them, and manage the business or the school or whatever. But in fact, as time went on, everyone began to hear about and think about the numbers all the time. By now, we run everything using these spreadsheets and these numbers, the databases, and so on. So like a chain store, or it could be a fast food chain, or it could be a fabric, a clothing chain or any other chain, collects data, as much data as it possibly can about what happens in its stores, and based on that is constantly adjusting and optimizing every single detail of its product lineup, its staff, the scripts that the staff are supposed to follow when interacting with users, with customers, and you know, what flavor of hamburger is available this month. Okay, everything is being tuned and adjusted based on millions and millions of numbers, and they keep trying to collect more, and you know, and down to the centimeter, of your everything about your layout is tuned. So the result is, and this is true for our schools, our businesses, our governments, even our homes, our goals for our family lives, and our leisure, and our movies, and so on. And the result is that since you're basing it all on a lot of data about what people are doing already, and you're just trying to optimize it bit by bit, you don't get anything really new from this. Your fast food business is not going to make any revolutionary new decisions or change their way of business in a fundamental way. Instead, it'll just tune and get something that keeps the customer coming back, where every detail helps the customer flow without any thought through the front door to the and make the order and get their food and wander out eventually. But it doesn't feel, it feels, it has what I call a plastic feeling. It's not really about any personality, or you're not meeting you're meeting generic workers there, or maybe nowadays you don't even talk to a worker, you just go to a screen and tap some buttons to get your food, and it's an experience that's been designed for you. It's sort of like going to a movie, and this is the result. You know, everything is more and more becomes more and more controlled by the numbers, so you have less and less personality at your school and your teachers and so on, and more of just emphasis on meeting certain metrics and saying, we have the best metrics, go to our school. So AI is just one more step along this path, so we can already know what it will give us. It will give us more of this plastic sort of improvement, gradual adjustment and improvement, and numbers-based stuff, and less personality, and no revolutions. So let me discuss for a few minutes how this data-driven process works, how data-driven decision-making works, and then after that we'll talk about the data that's been collected, and some of the long-term negative things that have been going on are already in trends that are already going on in a negative direction, and that AI is just one more step along that path. As I said a few minutes ago, we've worked ourselves into a corner. The human race has been following this technocratic path, and by now we're getting boxed into a corner, a dead end, and we don't really have a way out. Well, there is a way out, and I'll discuss that in the next episode. So I'll discuss how this whole data-driven decision-making works. AI is just one more example of it. The generalities are the same. So the way it works is you gather as much data as possible, and on top of that you impose metrics metrics mean some goal that you are aiming for, like certain test scores by a certain percentage of your student population, or a metric might be that customers will generally return to the store within a month, and what percentage of them do that. Or it could be just simply your profit for the month or the year. Okay. You also develop procedures. You're always developing procedures about how to analyze the data, but also about what to do about the data, how to run your business. You develop schema, so a way of sorting out the data into of organizing it. And then you also do data cleaning. So you say, okay, well, this data doesn't quite fit, or there was something wrong with the way that this data was obtained. We'll leave it out and proceed without that. So these are all procedures that and techniques that you develop. And then you have a staff that looks at the data, massages it, and tries to look at it from many angles. They do what's called data mining. Okay, and the goal is to find trends and patterns and relationships within the data. Once you have massaged the data, for instance, you find that using a particular product lineup on Tuesdays increases customer satisfaction, then by a certain percentage, then you can make predictions and decisions and policy. So based on the data, in your technicians, your specialists, and your massaging of the data, you arrive at policy. So an example would be designing the script that your employees are supposed to use when they interact with the customers. So if somebody comes to the cash register and says such and such, what is the employee supposed to have memorized and ready to say? Okay. Or another kind of policy would be a government's policy about which neighborhoods to police, which are the neighborhoods that are in need of police work, and which ones can the police just ignore. And also, it can also think of and develop decisions and policies about who it thinks will commit crimes, and then therefore make decisions ahead about maybe even before somebody commits a crime, make a decision about what to do with that person. This is all being done today in many different places, including what's called the free world. So I should just mention briefly that AI, we can talk about an old AI, everything up until, say, the last 10 years or 5 years. That was a business of giving the computer ever more sophisticated sets of rules, so making more and more intricate, complicated machines for going through data and making decisions. Okay, and the computer would just become ever better at applying these intricate decision-making rules to, say, be a better chess player. The new AI, which is called, these neural networks, what they do is you give them a lot of data, and they learn to imitate the data. So it's and I'm not sure if learning is the correct word, but that's what they do. They imitate the data. You throw a huge amount of data at them, and they imitate it. And they find trends, and well, I don't know if, again, they see. It's basically a matter of finding trends, patterns, and relationships in the data of data mining. But using a computer, and the key is to give it a huge amount of data. So AI, modern AI, is just an assistant with the data analysis, and you're always going to need people to assist it with that. It is going to assist people, and people will assist it. It's never going to do it by itself. it will be building on the input of, in fact, the data has to come from somewhere. So it can, in particular, if it needs to, for instance, if there are many, suppose it's trying to generate something that sounds like human language, right? Then you have to give it a lot of examples of sentences that were generated by humans, okay? And you probably also have to give it examples of things that are clearly not human language. So at some point you're going to have to instruct it, well, this particular thing that you did, that you generated, was not really human language and it's not acceptable. And have to give it input for a while, or maybe on an ongoing basis, so that it has some ability to figure out or to find a trend in what is acceptable human language and what is just gobbledygook. So overall, modern AI follows trends in the data, it finds patterns in the data, and when there's a gap in the data and you ask it and you need it to do something where there's no data directly pertaining to that case, it confabulates, it invents things, often wildly. So it tries to find an average, okay, but if you are looking at an average between red and sweet, okay, for instance, it's going to invent, okay, and who knows what will it invent if there's a category problem, just for example. So one problem with, there are several problems with the AI. One is that it's really, the focus is all about the data and about imitating it, finding patterns in it, and so on. There's no notion in the computer's mind of true or good or beautiful. Okay, it's just whether it's just in some sense imitating the data. Okay, it's not making it. There's no judgment calls about, and there's no sense of what's good or beautiful or true. Okay. Another issue is that it can't explain or defend or debate its analysis. Like if it seems to have learned something, it can't tell you what pattern or trend did it find in the data, and it can't defend or discuss its decisions. If you ask it to discuss its decisions, as people do today, it's inventing. It's not really telling you about its decisions. It's inventing something for you to, an explanation for you as it goes. Okay, so therefore oversight is impossible unless you are willing and have money to redo all of its work. Okay. Now, and another issue about its learning is that AI, the modern neural networks, language models, and so on, they can be thrown off by extremely small things. You add a tiny bit of fuzziness or noise superimposed on the data, and it can get things completely wrong. Just things that would not confuse us in the least, but somehow it just begins making category errors under the, when it can be thrown off by very tiny things. If you know how to poison the data, you can poison the AI's analysis of the data, and so you wonder whether it's really learning anything at all when you see these see how easy it is to throw it off in a fundamental way. It's clearly not reasoning about the data. So now if you are trying to save money and time by using AI, then one of the prices that you pay is that you abdicate responsibility for the decisions that are made with the assistance of AI, and you lose any insight into those decisions because you're trying to save money and time. Therefore, you're not willing, you don't have the money and the resources and the time to have somebody or some group of people go and redo the analysis themselves and check their analysis and their decision making against the AI's results. So in the end, you adopt a black box solution. You maybe try for a while to preserve some insight and to do some oversight, but that ability will be limited. In the end, you progressively lose control. And then there's the problem of confabulation, which I mentioned already, where you see that in some AI videos that have been movies that have been made, where you see cats suddenly. You have to look very carefully to notice it, okay? But because somehow the AI makes it very convincing, but a cat may momentarily possess a fifth leg and then it may disappear, or you may see a pack of dogs where the number of dogs from second to second changes from 3 to 8 to 5 to 2. And it looks more or less convincing unless you're really thinking about what you're watching, and then you realize, oh, there's something odd here. That woman had a third arm. Okay. So this is what AI will do, because it does not possess real reason about the data. It doesn't know the rule that women can't have 3 arms, or that the number of dogs in a pack of dogs can't change abruptly or smoothly from 2 to 7 to 5 except by birth and so on. It doesn't know these rules, and so it makes something that looks roughly reasonable, but is absolutely impossible. Okay. So let's go on. It's looking for the trends and patterns and relationships and associations in the data, and it's trying to imitate the data in some sense. Okay. And because it's all about data, it's very resource intensive. It needs lots of sensors, lots of communications, data storage, computation, and lots of human input. Okay, humans guiding the AI, and so it's very expensive, actually. And so the whole AI program, and this is true not just of AI but of technocracy, it's desperate for our attention. It needs us to participate. It needs us to give it continually our attention and our input and our recordings. Okay, and because it doesn't work with a lot, except with large amounts of data. Okay, it can't reason about specific instances. Okay, it can't. In fact, it's very poor, in fact pathetic, with making local decisions about local situations with limited data. At that point, you could get a better decision by rolling dice. Okay, it can't reason about specific instances. In fact, it can't reason at all. There's no truth, and there's only imitation and association, and in fact, association also has this problem that if you suppose you notice that on that people named Fred, out of 100 people named Fred, many of them like to eat pistachio ice cream. Okay, does that signal that because they are named Fred, they like pistachio ice cream, or is it something to do with pistachio ice cream being favored by families who like the name Fred? Okay, there's a backwards-forwards logic that you can never resolve by looking at associations. If you see that people who drink a glass of wine every day have less heart attacks, okay, does that mean that having less heart attacks, that being healthier means that if you're healthier people drink less wine, drink a glass of wine, or does it mean that drinking a glass of wine makes you healthier? So that's just a basic requirement for being able to reason about something, and it's just absent. It's something you can't figure out by examining data. And it's true for just as much for technocracies and technocratic workers as it is for AI. Okay, so because it gets very poor results when working over small amounts of data, and it's all data based, it's always always conservative, always inventive, and not original. Okay, it's in terms of being expensive, by now we're spending at least as much energy, probably several times as much energy on our data collection, our cell phone device, our smartphones, and every other sensor device, and all the networking and the databases and so on, the data centers, as we eat in a day. Okay, we're giving more to this technocratic infrastructure than we give to ourselves as food. Okay, and you can notice that, you know, still today, even with all this resources being thrown at the technocratic structure and at AI, it still is giving us an incremental improvement over our own human abilities. Okay, the fact is, you have a human operates on 100 watts, the same as a PC, and a human delivers far more than any PC or any combination of cell phones and other devices will ever deliver. We're just much more efficient at everything. Our brains are a much cheaper way of gathering and processing data. Another problem with this approach is because it's all based on data and fine-tuning, say, a chain store to match the data, it's very fragile against anything that's not in the data set. Okay, so if whatever the chain store is not paying attention to may come to haunt it. Okay, and it smothers revolutions. Okay. So at present, you know, if you look at how much we're spending on computing and data and so on, and you know that we've maxed out our hardware's capabilities, and now it's just a matter of building more hardware. You notice that for more than a decade, the amount of smartphones that we build each year is just about the same. We can't seem to build them any faster. Presumably that's because they require a certain amount of resources, and we can only spend so much on those resources on building smartphones every year. Then you look at all the other sensors that would be useful for the technocratic society, and we're maxing out on our ability to build all that equipment. Okay, so and then you need to think about the fact that our energy supply will divide by 2 in the coming era, and our resources in general, and so we're close to our limit, and we aren't going to get that much more from AI or from the technocratic paradigm. I want to come back to something that I missed. In fact, it wasn't just because of AI, it was because of all our pursuit of data-driven decision-making. We practically speaking, we have progressively abdicated our responsibility and our understanding for our decisions. Okay, a large company, you know, or a school or whatever, there's a lot of finger pointing to rules or to metrics or to other people or to external organizations about decisions, and the buck doesn't really stop anywhere anymore. This happens in any bureaucracy, and we've been taking it as far as we can. So if using AI means that you don't have insight into its decisions anymore, and that you no longer can take full responsibility for the decisions because AI is making them, well, that in a way is just the same as it's always been whenever you pursued a bureaucratic, technocratic paradigm. So I want to say something about the data that's being collected. By now, basically all human knowledge, the whole corpus of human knowledge, has been gathered into global databases, and it's been under analysis for many decades already. Some of those databases are free and public, like Wikipedia has some of it. Some of it is owned and licensed, so if you pay a certain amount of money, you'll be able to access some of that data. And there are also private and hidden databases, and then there's and all of this is supported by a rich legal framework of ownership and IP, so that many large parties own data, including all sorts of data about you and me, where we've been today, and our banking, and so on. There's all sorts of things in databases that don't belong to us and that we don't even know about. And it looks like there's certainly a move towards outlawing and penalizing and discouraging activities that generate data that's less easy to track. So, for instance, I think there's certainly an effort to make it difficult or to use cash, and we can expect that sooner or later there will be efforts to make it illegal to use cash. So there was analysis based on metrics and algorithms long before AI. There were specialties and professions, okay, and by now all the specialties and professions have databases about everything that they care about to accomplish their work. For instance, in law, there's large databases of case law. They have curricula for their training, they have handbooks, they have standardized tests, they have procedures, okay, and all of these are in the large databases. So everything about how to do every single profession is recorded somewhere and accessible to whoever has the databases. So in particular, workers who have perfected, following the handbooks and the trainings and doing things by procedure and meeting the metrics of a good school teacher, for instance, these people are ripe for replacement, because all the things that they've been trying so hard to learn by heart and to implement flawlessly are all recorded somewhere. So everything that we've written down, that the human race has written down, and many other things that we've said and done, are recorded. All our libraries, all our scientific papers and texts, much of our dialogue, our emails, and our video, all of this was being gathered and owned inside of legal frameworks and mined for decisions long before AI. So that's the extent of it. And I'll come back to this: the fact that all of this is under ownership. All of it can be managed and reworked by AI. It creates a substantial risk for the human race, but I'll come back to that in a bit. First, I want to talk about a long-term degradation in our human communication and relationships, which has occurred throughout the 20th century and now the 21st century. Okay, and I'm talking about this both because it enables AI and enables the technocratic paradigm, and also because it makes the products of the technocratic paradigm more attractive to us. So what do I mean? So I mean that, for instance, let's talk about conversations that would go on in storefronts or in retail stores, the relationships between people, between the person running the store, say the owner of the store even, and the person who comes in to buy something. Well, 50 years ago, these things were done in person. You walked into a store, you talked with somebody, you bought something. and there was always a notion, because of the person, there was a person talking to a person, there was a notion in the back of both people's heads that of honesty, of keeping promises, and of service. Okay, this was a reference point. Now whether these people really were honest or intended to be honest, or whether they had hearts of steel, or just out to grift from each other, is another matter. But it was always in the back of your head what's honest, what's not, what's actually helping this customer out, what's not. It was a reference point. And there was always the possibility that the customer could return to the store, and if he liked what the product or didn't like the product, he could always return, and that seeing each other, that there would be an ongoing relationship that could grow. Okay, all that is gone. So now we have, so first we had phones, so business done over phones. Then we had phones where you would connect to somebody in a call center in a foreign country. Okay, and then very quickly, at first those people in the call center actually might be in your own country, and maybe they had access to all the data of the business, maybe they actually worked for the business. Okay, but progressively that changed. I was there. I particularly dealt with that, and as I used to travel by air an awful lot, and so as I dealt with airlines and so on. But now call center workers have scripts, and they have no ability to get anything done. Every time you call, you get a different person. These people have no responsibility and no authority, and they have no ability to investigate the truth. They're part of a completely different company that's probably in a different country. They've been castrated. Okay, conversation between the customer and the person that they're buying from has disappeared, and instead we have something that would be more appropriately called interaction or manipulation. Okay, so we have call center workers, we have menuing systems, we have chatbots, we have agents, we have Siri. Okay, if we want to, AI agents that we talk to, we have Siri. And even when we go in-store, the in-store workers have very little training. They have strict scripts and instructions, and they're under constant threat to follow those instructions to the letter. So they know exactly what to say and when to say it, and if you ask them this, if you try to get them to say anything different, they won't. Okay, this is not just in commerce. Everywhere in our schools, in medicine, in policing, in government, in our churches, among our groups of friends. At home, we've been moving into a post-truth society where it's not about conversation or relationship between persons, it's about interaction and manipulation. So instead of, in fact, you go to coffee with your family, and every member of your family sits at the coffee table and gazes at their cell phone. So AI is just one more step in this movement. Okay, it knows how to make things that are attractive but not beautiful. Okay, it's away from personality. We're moving away from honest relationships towards interactions. We're not honest relationships with real people and who keep their word and tell the truth. There's less and less of that. Okay, language itself has been dumbed down. You compare the novels and the public speeches of 1900 to 1950, and then of 1950 to today. Okay, most people today would find it difficult to read the writings of 1950, and many people would find things, speeches and writings of 1900 incomprehensible. So we have many today find it difficult to write a grammatical sentence, to write any paragraph, or to read even a few pages of today's simple prose. Okay, this has again to do with the technocratic paradigm. So for instance, novels were guided by metrics. I remember the bookshelves of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even today were filled with these metric-driven managed novels, okay, with policies and marketing and so on. And so we got the content-free novel, many different. There were the mysteries, there were the suspense novels, the romances, and the sci-fi and the fantasy, different genres, and all of them, most of them just content-free. They were entertaining and uninformative because they were guided by the numbers. So AI just continues this trend. It has a gift for the gab. It's vapid, okay, but has no insight, no meaning, no truth, and no beauty, okay. And a lot of my point here is that AI looks attractive and intelligent to us because of where we are today. It would not be nearly as attractive to somebody who of say a century ago, who reads Dickens and Jane Austen and the Bible and Homer and Augustine, okay, St. Augustine. You can also see that today by comparing classic movies, say, Hitchcock or the best movies of the 40s to TikTok videos today, and then comparing that to AI. Okay, AI, if you're used to 15-second TikTok videos, AI is not so bad. Okay, but if you're comparing it to a real movie, a real art form, there's no comparison. Overall, as we moved from books and music towards video, there was just the fundamentals of how that works biologically is much different. Okay, a book and music is analogous. A book invites you to dialogue with yourself, to the author, even though he's not there, and towards meditative reasoning. It's a kind of communication. Okay, a video, on the other hand, goes right to a very primitive part of your brain. That's sensitive to movement, and it causes instant hallucinations. You immediately start thinking and feeling as if you were whatever in the situation just shown by the movie, and that you're the person that's there. Okay, so unless video is managed, it replaces communication and dialogue with manipulation and training. You're being trained. So by now, video is largely a vehicle into a post-truth world. That's the way it's being used. And most of us are becoming illiterate, and many of us will be, much of the world will be illiterate in 10 to 20 years. Okay. So along with that, if you speak wrongly, according to some, in a way that somebody disagrees with, by now it's hate speech. It's not communication or dialogue, it's just hate speech. So again, AI is just a continuation, and it's of a trend that's been going on, a technocratic-based trend, and how our communications have been evolving for more than 100 years, and it's also more attractive because of how far we've gotten on that trend. Okay. So the way that AI speech and text works is by its language models works is by imitating and plagiarizing and confabulating from a huge database of human speech. So it puts it all in a blender and does free association and generates speech. Okay, I'll pause here and I'll come back to this in a second. Well, I'm glad I paused where I did, because it allowed me a little time to gather my thoughts. So I started out by discussing where this episode on Technocracy and AI belongs in the sequence of this channel. And then I put forth my main thesis for this episode, which is that the main thesis is that AI is just one more in a program of action that revolves around data and specialisms and best practices, and that I call technocracy. It involves a lot of data collection, surveillance, control, and bureaucracy, and we've seen it taken to new levels with modern globalized business, chain stores, and metrics-based everything, including metrics-based family, social services, churches, yeah. And therefore, you can't expect anything different from AI really than AI is just going to produce more of the same plastic chain stores, big box stores, and more of the same metrics-based efforts to educate everyone and to run our businesses and our governments and so on. It'll just do it well. And it will involve a progressive loss of responsibility and insight into decisions, which has already been going on throughout our endeavor to build a bureaucracy and a technocracy. Passing the buck was already famous a century ago, as were paper chases, where you go to one office for a stamp and another office for a stamp and another office for a stamp before you finally, and you can continue doing this for many more steps before you finally get to your goal. At each level, finding another bureaucrat or office of bureaucrats. It's a paper chase, and it's an abdication of responsibility and insight and on behalf of specialties and bureaucracy and progressivism. Okay. Then I made some comments about how this all works, how the technocracy works, and how AI in particular works, and therefore a number of its limitations. And then I pointed out that by now basically all human knowledge has been gathered into large databases, which are mostly under private control and not visible to the public, though there is quite a bit that is visible to the public, but not nearly the same as what's invisible, including all sorts of data about you and me, but also all of our cultural heritage and all our knowledge about how to do any particular specialty or profession, okay, has been gathered. And it's owned too. It's under IP, intellectual property rights. And then and I'll come back to that. It was going on long before AI, and AI is now able to mine that data and do new things with that data. And then I discussed at length a long-term degradation in our ability to communicate and relate with each other, as our means of communication became more and more metrics-based, numbers-based, and managed. We've progressively lost our ability to communicate, and we are much more about interaction and manipulation now. It's invaded every detail of our lives. Okay. And now I'm going to make a couple more points where, and that the fact that we're now interaction and manipulation based, we're being trained and formed by video as opposed to books, which are mostly about communication. So first of all, that makes AI look more attractive because we're so dumbed down that it doesn't take much to be, for AI doesn't have to do that much to look smart, but also it's a natural next step of this process. And then I was about to get into another point, which was about AI style of reasoning, if you want to call it that, in particular about how it generates text or speech. The way it works is it has a huge database of recordings of human text and speech, and it just enormous amounts of all literature and enormous amounts of audio and video, and it in a huge database. It trains on that, which means more or less it puts it all in a blender, and then it, depending on what you speak to it, it free associates, a lot like what happens when you're dreaming. When in your dreaming or in daydreaming, one idea can lead to another idea, which isn't isn't one thing reminds you of another thing, reminds you of another thing, reminds you of another thing, and that's what's going on with AI. It's analyzed connections between different words and different sentences, different concepts. It tries to identify the concepts and identifies connections with them, and then it free associates to generate interesting sentences to speak to you. It is very dreamlike, and in fact, this kind of reasoning, associative reasoning, is a very limited kind of reasoning, and it can take you a certain distance, but if you're doing only associative reasoning, you get into trouble, and it can be really serious trouble pretty quickly. There's a book that by a famous author named Umberto Eco. It's called Foucault's Pendulum. It's a novel, and in particular, chapter 118, it's 118, one of the last chapters sort of summarizes what comes of this associative reasoning, where one thing reminds you of another, and then you're confirmed that the reasoning went well if you come back full circle, right? If you started with a key and that reminded you of something else, it reminded you of something else. Maybe these are all not just reminders. They're, everyone knows that a key goes with a lock, right? And then a lock goes with a jail, and then a jail goes with, I don't know, say striped pants, and then striped, and as long as you can make a full circle coming back to where you started, back to keys, you know that this all made sense. It confirms you. And this is kind of the reasoning that goes back, that underpins a lot of conspiracy theories. And in fact, Foucault's Pendulum, the author goes on for at length, I don't know, hundreds of pages, spinning out a kind of conspiracy theory before he finally sums up what the process was in chapter 118. And it's also, this conspiracy theory and Foucault's Pendulum turns out to be of tremendous interest, according to the story, to some people interested in the occult and obtaining occult power. Okay, and it is, but in general, when you do this free, it's not logic based so much. It's not like you're reasoning from one thing to the next, saying this, therefore that. It's just that everyone knows that this man was related to this. That this man was a secret Mason, and he was in the same club as some other person who was into the Kabbalah, whatever, and then you make connections and more connections until you come up with a secret society or whatever. This is the way that many conspiracy theories work, and they also, also theories connected with the occult, with UFOs, and with demons. Okay, and this sort of reasoning where your reasoning based on one thing tends to happen, that there's some connection, observed connection, that you can't figure out from databases whether one thing caused another, or whether the other one caused the first thing, or whether they just happen to happen in some more or less in the same time in the same place. Okay, but all AI has to go on is a database of text and of human words, and it notices that one word goes with another often enough, and therefore it free associates. And this allows it to begin, and it has no real defense against this, because it doesn't have logic. It doesn't have a notion of truth, beauty, or justice, or good. Okay, and it's just free associating for you. So it makes something that sounds reasonable and even attractive, because it tends to employ flattery or to speak to you as if you were a genius, and it will take you in the direction, the same sort of logic and the same sort of direction as many people have who have gotten into conspiracy theories, UFOs, and the occult and demonology. Okay, it hallucinates. You know, it seems reasonable the way that your mind hallucinates in sleep, or when you're just sick. Okay, and you have to bear in mind that the database it's drawing from, the database of human generated text, okay, includes everything human. It doesn't just include the things that are true or the things that are good, but it includes an awful lot of what's the most sick and evil about human thinking and thought and feelings. Okay, so when AI speaks to you, it's whether it's even if it's speaking to you about a technical subject. Okay, the fact is it's been trained on all the corpus of human knowledge, including the most evil things. Okay, and it's free associating with that, so you're pulling in that too. Okay, so don't be surprised if a conversation with the AI or whatever text it generates, don't be at all surprised if it takes you probably sooner rather than later, in odd directions that, if you pursue them, will become very dark. Okay, so that's just the way that associative reasoning works if you rely exclusively on it. It has to do with the fact that it's not based on truth. Okay, it's based on connections. So another point, in this connection, I just suggest some of the videos of Jonathan Pajot, who's talked about this a bit. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says. I haven't listened to everything he says, but it certainly is thought-provoking. But you know, there certainly can be, because AI can be an instantiation of human. In fact, it draws entirely on human feelings, thoughts, and agendas. It reflects everything that it draws on, and so don't expect that it's going to be clean. Okay, humans are full of murderous, dirty things, and our hearts and our minds are, and expect those to fill into AI and to come seeping out of it whenever you interact with it. I'm not saying that it's all bad necessarily. I'm just saying don't expect to get a very muddy pool, and it's very muddy water, and don't expect if some monster hints at its existence and once in a while, you know, really acts. The Loch Ness monster really is there. Then I want to talk about something also monstrous, okay, that looks like it's about to happen. It's in the stage of happening, and it's not just because of AI. It's because of the whole technocratic ownership of the corpus of human knowledge. Okay, and here I want to say, and it's under private ownership largely. Okay, often secretly. You know, we don't know who knows what. Okay, and I want to mention that in his recent letter, Magnificat Humanitas, or translated The Grandeur of Humanity, Pope Leo, he published it in June 2026, he said that this is stealing when data about you in particular is not under your possession, and this amounts to stealing. It's theft. Okay. When you don't have any say about it, in fact, people don't have to pay you anything to use information about you. Okay, and I think, yes, basically it is. Okay, we really need to do a reset about this sort of knowledge about you and me that should be in the possession of others. Okay, but I think that the notion of stealing is broader and deeper. Okay, and it's not just the personal knowledge about your activities and mine. It's also the fact that the whole human corpus is now under certain control. Okay, and including large amounts of information which is not shared. It's gathered and not shared. It's proprietary. The human corpus should be under public possession. It should not be something gathered by private parties. The whole library should, and I mean, sure, you can put all the books in a library somewhere, or you can make a Wikipedia with an encyclopedia of human knowledge, but the fact is human knowledge goes far beyond that by now, right? And all the manuals of best practices, all the trainings, all the data about what individual people have said to each other on the phone, or their emails, all the data about people's whereabouts and their comings and goings, their shopping, all that is data that has been gathered. It is being gathered, and in some sense it should be public, under public possession, not private possession. How you would do that without, I mean, you can't, I mean, I'm not saying that you should have all the data about me and where I've been, and I should have all the data about you and where I've been. Okay, I'm saying that if anybody has that data, or is able to extract something from that data, maybe the statistics of how many people visited a particular store in a given day, or then this sort of thing should be available to everyone, not a few people. So I don't know how to arrange that, but a good first step would be to say that, wipe out those databases, and then let's start over. Let's think about how to share the human corpus with everyone. But it gets worse than that, okay? Because AI plagiarizes this. That's how it works. I talk about association, free association, but what it's doing is it's taking a bit of text from me, a bit of text from you, and a bit of text from Moby Dick or from Charles Dickens. It's blending them together. That means it's copying, it's plagiarizing from many authors at once, and it's producing some text that Siri speaks to you about some topic, okay? It's plagiarizing, it puts it all in a blender and imitates, okay? But it's not just plagiarizing, it's corrupting that corpus. It produces new content, okay? And it adds that new content generated by AI to the content that humans have already generated, okay? And without any notion of truth, good, justice, or beauty, okay? The new content is not at all of the same quality as the previous content. And this has actually been going on in a similar way for decades, because I'm a scientist, and we have metric-driven science, where the key things are to produce papers in famous journals, and to get them cited, okay? And it's all driven by whether you satisfy these metrics, okay? And the goal is not truth, beauty, justice, or anything. It's just getting popular and getting in journals, okay? And so people have been generating stuff that is of much lower quality than what people used to, in order to get the right metrics and to get ahead in their careers, for their departments to get ahead, and so on. Okay. And so the scientific corpus in particular is getting corrupted by metrics-driven science. And this is just taking one step forward where you don't need the human agent, the scientist, to be actively involved in writing the text. Now the AI will do it to you for metrics. Okay. Lots of scientists by now are using AI to supposedly help them with their research and to write their papers. And many other people are using AI to write emails and essays and anything. Okay. So many people are claiming that they're doing the writing themselves when AI is doing it for them. For a scientist who needs to publish a lot of papers, AI can be tremendous help doing the research for you and writing for you. Okay. It can certainly generate a lot of papers. A lot of science is about personal judgment calls, about experts doing their best and with lots of experience and lots of intuition and going far beyond just what's in the handbooks and debate. One person says one thing, another one comes back. Okay, and this is being replaced by AI's confabulation and no opportunity, no possibility of explanation, so therefore no possibility of debate. Okay, just it will spew out something, and then you're stuck with it. Okay, so this is a disaster for me and for this book, this channel that I'm generating. Actually, it's not such a disaster because I've already generated almost all the content it's written in a book. But a lot of what I do for writing this content is I do research through all sorts of scientific literature, and I do have to do a lot of weeding already because there's a lot of dreck mixed into the scientific literature. I have to make judgments about what was based on metrics and what's really a person doing their best to tell the truth, and how something is tilted or skewed because of an agenda. Okay, I have to do a lot of that already, but with AI, it means that basically I have very little trust in anything written from 2025 onwards, maybe 2024, because I have to bear in mind that whatever paper I read from 2025 or 2024 may have been partly written or researched by AI with inadequate oversight from the scientists and the reviews and so on. Okay. So already I'm doing a lot of winnowing. Okay, but the signal to noise ratio is going to get a lot smaller in the next years, because more and more scientists, the ones that have careers and sustain their careers, are just going to be using AI. So in my opinion, this era of some hundreds of years since Newton and earlier of scientific discourse in public journals is rapidly ending, okay, at least on public forums. I think there will still be ways that scientists can communicate with each other one-on-one in private forums, and we will still find ways of carrying on science, but really handicapped compared to where we were, where we've been for the last hundreds of years. We're just going to find ourselves swamped in this flood that we've been building for decades, and it's finally over our heads. Okay, it will go further than that. AI can rewrite the entire human corpus, and it will. Okay, you can just instruct it, well, I want you to stop being sexist, and it will rewrite everything in the corpus to not be sexist. Okay, or however you want to steer it, it will do it for you. Okay, and we'll get many copies of AI of the human corpus, and the original corpus may well just completely disappear. It'll be very hard to distinguish the original corpus from the new corpus. Okay, and I should point out in this connection that I first got started buying from Amazon 20 some years ago because I could obtain used books from Amazon cheaply, and I could search, and also they gave me a better selection. If I wanted a book, I could almost always find it on Amazon, where I couldn't find it on other websites. They had almost everything. Okay, and now it's becoming harder and harder to buy used books on Amazon. More and more in the last couple of years, what I do is if I search on a title, it will give me a newly printed version of that book, because there are now businesses that as soon as you search on something and order it, they'll just print it for you and send it to you. So we can expect that there are plenty of chances and opportunities to move towards censorship, towards just taking all used books and pulping them, and then when somebody wants Dr. Seuss or Moby Dick or Charles Dickens or the Bible, giving them a newly printed one that's been rewritten. Okay. Or another alternative is just to ensure that almost everyone is illiterate. We seem to be on that path anyway. So what I'm talking about is in that the possibility and likelihood of a pretty complete destruction of the entire corpus of human knowledge. Overall, I'll come back to what I had to say in the first place. We've worked ourselves into a corner. We've taken the technocracy ideas so far that we've gotten to a point where we're risking the destruction of everything we know, our ability to communicate, to relate, and so on. And we don't seem to have an off ramp. There's a logic to this dragging us along, and it's very hard to get off this train. So it's been 80 minutes so far. I think I'll stop here. I'll have another shorter episode to follow this up about how to defend against this juggernaut. AI and the technocratic paradigm, they do have a feet of clay. There are ways to really prevent this from happening. To make sure that it doesn't destroy you in particular, but I mean, certainly the society as we know it, as we've known it for the last 100, 200 years, doesn't look like it's going to be at all the same 50 years from now. But there are ways that we can steer things so that something survives, and that so I'll talk about that in the next episode. I think this episode has gone on long enough. I thank you for your attention. If you know anybody who would be interested in this content, please invite them to join in, and do keep coming back. Have a great week.